Let me ask you question number 3. How long do you think how long of a notice should I give my patients before I drop their insurance plan?
Well, another great question. Um, you want to talk to as many patients as possible face to face about what's happening regarding your status with their insurance company. You want to talk to them. The biggest mistake that any dentist could make is simply sending your patients a letter saying you're now out of network. Biggest mistake by far. First of all, many people won't read it. Many people will read it and not understand it. And many people just take the letter and say, well, I'll just go somewhere else. But if you talk to patients face to face, the likelihood that that patient would stay in your practice is much greater. You know, one of our goals in our coaching is that we want the existing patients that are on Delta. I'll use Delta as an example as we've used it thematically in this episode. You want your existing Delta patients to stay in your practice as patients even once you resign from being a contracted provider with Delta. You want them to stay in your office. And the best way to do that is to actually talk to as many patients as you can face to face. Now, there's no way to ever talk to all of your patients, Aaron, because some patients are on their own schedule, with hygiene. But your good patients you see every 6 months. So a 6-month period of talking to your patients as they come in for their hygiene appointments would be a good cycle to follow to talk to as many patients as possible. And what we do is we simply identify, if we're using Delta, we would identify all the Delta patients on our schedule today. We'd assign a specific team member to have a conversation with them. That way, no one will slip through the cracks. And we'll have the heads up conversation. Nothing happening today, nothing changing today, but effective July 1st, and I'm just making up an example, will no longer be contracted with Delta Dental. So that's why we use that time period. We use a recall cycle to talk to as many of those patients as possible. Of course, you can accelerate that if you like. That could be a shorter period where we don't reach everyone face to face, but you'll be more successful if you talk to people face to face as much as possible.
So you're saying use that 6 months. So let's say the recall cycle in your practice is 6 months. Most of your patients will see you every 6 months. That means start having these conversations 6 months before you drop the plan.
Well, you could resign. Most plans have a 90-day notice period,
right?
Meaning a 90-day grace period where you have to stay in network after you've resigned. So you could start talking to them today. You could resign 90 days from now, and then you'll be required to be in network because of the 90-day notice for the next 3 months. So that'll take you to the 6-month point. That would be the sequencing of that.
Got it.
And that'll give you the best result. Although you can accelerate that, and we have many times we've accelerated it. So we can do some different things. We can send a video with the doctor, explaining what's happening. We can send a letter. We can send an email as well. All of those are not as successful, are not as impactful as talking to them face to face, but we can accelerate that if your practice is strong enough to do that.
Yeah, as you go through these questions, Gary, it just reminds me of the recent client you had who signed up with you as a coaching client after they dropped the plans, and they were in big trouble. Their schedule was like Swiss cheese, and I think a large number of patients just walked away, and like this practice was in a tailspin.
Yeah.
Of course, it took you a while to get them back, but you finally did get them back to where
it was
they
a
used to be,
rebuilding effort, though.
Yeah, it's a huge rebuilding effort, and a lot of lost money and revenue and profits along the way.
So anyone listening to this can avoid that by really, following the right sequence. And I have a vested interest, of course, but you can also enhance your results by having a coach that's been through this many times and walking you through all the details.
Yeah, I would strongly recommend anyone, who wants to avoid, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars in pain and suffering and lost revenues and profits, they should at least talk to Gary, book a coaching strategy meeting to see, okay, before you go down this road, like, do you have your ducks, in a row, and ideally even have Gary as your coach.
What's the link they can use to schedule a CSM?
Yeah, it's thrivingdentist.com/CSM.
That stands for
thrivingdentist.com.
coaching. CSM stands for coaching strategy meeting. That opens up my calendar. You see my calendar appointment digitally, and you pick the time that works best for you. My goal in that coaching meeting, a coaching strategy meeting, is to learn about your practice and then share a little bit of our coaching to see if it'd be a good fit in working together. And we are accepting new clients currently, although there are times where we have a wait list. We are currently accepting new clients and would love the opportunity to work with you if that was your interest.
Thank you, Gary. Let me go to question number 4. When is the best time to, I think that's the one I already covered. Let me go to the next one. I would love to get rid of Delta, but I live in a government employment city. Over 70% of my patients are Delta. Is it possible?
Naren, in just about every market, just about, Delta is the dominant insurance company by far. So it's not limited to state government or city government or local government. In almost every area, Delta is the dominant provider. Most school districts are Delta, most police departments, most fire departments, first responders, all Delta, and many private companies are Delta. So in most cases, it's been a rare occasion where I find another insurance company that has a larger number of patients in a practice than Delta. Almost every time it's Delta. So that's common. And that monopoly that they have really terrifies you. You look at your practice and you say, oh my gosh, can I even consider going out of network when 60% of my patients are Delta? 80% of my patients have PPO plans and 60% of those are Delta. Can I even consider going out of network? And what I always tell my clients, normally practices have multiple plans that they're participating with. Let's start with some of the smaller plans and build our skills around communicating with patients, around following all the steps, around answering FAQs. And then let's get to Delta. And then we can decide. Remember, you don't have to go all the way to fee for service to significantly improve your practice. Every time you successfully drop a PPO plan, you've improved your practice. What happens in most cases, my clients have experienced such great results in terms of retaining existing patients. Put another way, they lose way fewer patients than they thought, that it emboldens them to resign from Delta. And they do successfully resign from Delta. Now, remember, we always have with any insurance plan, we have a plan B. It's like having a backup parachute. Do you know that people that parachute out of airplanes, Naren, have 2 parachutes? They have the main chute and they have a backup parachute. Did you know that?
Yes.
And their goal is to never use the backup, but they have it there if needed. If the main one doesn't open, they pull the chute on the backup. Well, what's your backup? What's the backup plan if resigning doesn't work?
Go back and sign back up.
Sign back up. By the way, we've never had a client have to sign back up. That's never happened. You'd be the first, but that's never happened. But it's nice to know that you do have, just like parachutists will say, I have a backup chute, never had to use it, never planned to, but it's there if I need it. Can you sign back up with Delta? Of course you can. Can you sign back up with Blue Cross Blue Shield? Oh, yes. The only possible consequence with Delta is if you're Premier, they won't let you back in as Premier, but it's not that much of a Premier improvement over your fee schedule. So you'd have to sign back up as PPO. But by the way, it's never happened. So I hope that answers that question, Naren.
That's it for me, Gary. I asked you 4 questions. Any final thoughts as we bring this to a close?
Well, let's bring it back full circle. In the beginning, Naren, you invited our listeners to submit questions. Would you provide that email address one more time?
It's questions@lessinsurancedependence.com.
So guys, put your voice to action here. Let us know what your questions are. We'll be selecting those for future episodes. Thank you in advance. This is fun because it makes it very relevant to what's going on in your mind as we go through this. Last comment is I simply want to thank you for being a listener to the Less Insurance Dependence podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for the privilege of your time. We look forward to connecting with you on the next Less Insurance Dependence podcast.